One actor from Chicago Fire is hoping for an action-packed crossover in the future, and Season 13 already demonstrated exactly how to frame the storyline that would best set it up. Crossovers have happened in the franchise, with the Chicago Fire cast have rubbed elbows with fellow first responders in the CPD, and at Gaffney numerous times since the spin-offs began. Their second crossover even established that Chicago Fire and Chicago PD exist in the same universe as Law and Order. SVU, widening the net on possible crossovers available to explore in Chicago Fire Season 14. If anything, Chicago Fire's decision to not cross over with its other properties occasionally seems odd. Even though Severide's OVI work sometimes leads to storylines that, in theory, require police involvement, Chicago Fire rarely uses talent from its spin-offs unless their parts are significant enough to outweigh schedule and budgetary constraints. Even the murder investigation-focused Chicago Fire Season 13 finale went on without the assistance of the Chicago PD characters, though this was because intelligence was also addressing their problems. One actor, nevertheless, has very particular crossover aspirations. Chicago Fire's Jocelyn Houdon wants Novak to cross over with the Chicago PD team. She specifically wants to be involved in the action. Lizzie might be a relative newcomer to 51, but her somewhat limited participation in the 2025 One Chicago crossover seems to have left her wanting more. She got to work closely with fellow franchise freshman John Frost, since which actor Jocelyn Houdon has toyed with the possibility of a Chicago Fire and Med crossover romance. But Novak didn't get to interact with the Chicago PD cast much in the crossover, and certainly not as meaningfully as characters like Mouch and Stella. By contrast, Jocelyn Houdon's Chicago PD crossover ideas would put Novak in a much more substantial, action-oriented role. Houdon's endearingly enthusiastic readiness to become as involved as possible mirrors Lizzie's personality in a rather charming way, but she's also hitting on a pretty fresh idea. Most crossovers between Chicago Fire and Chicago PD have involved bombings and arson cases, situations that call for Ambo 61's help but don't really necessitate their involvement in the investigation. A crossover that puts Violet and Lizzie more in the spotlight would be satisfying new ground to cover, and One Chicago Fire Season 13 episode arguably came close to delivering on that very premise. Chicago Fire Season 13 gave Ambo 61 a major investigation story, but Novak was barely involved. It quickly became a joint effort between Violet and Carver. One of the biggest late-season storylines for Ambo 61 occurred in Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 19, when Violet and Lizzie discovered a patient who was left to die after a botched emergency procedure by a rogue paramedic. With a bit of help from the CPD, Mikami was able to track down the culprit and dissuade him from putting further lives in jeopardy. And it would be interesting to hear Houdon's perception of this story on the One Chicago podcast, since it ultimately didn't give her the investigation plotline in which she was hoping to participate. Although Lizzie's on the initial call that spurs the investigation, she proceeds to spend the bulk of the episode begging Ritter to let her move in with him. Violet largely investigates the rogue paramedic with help from Carver, while Novak remains uninvolved, a story decision clearly orchestrated to give the complicated couple one-on-one time to check in on their relationship after his most recent absence. This particular investigation wouldn't have given Novak the adrenaline-fueled story that Houdon desires anyway, but it does work as a prototype for how her desired Chicago PD crossover might be framed. How Chicago Fire Season 14 can justify Novak's team-up with Chicago PD. Lizzie may have to lay her life on the line to pull it off. Novak won't be pushed out of the way to make room for Sam anymore, now that Carver and Violet's Chicago Fire romance is likely being shelved in the wake of Jake Lockett's exit from the show. But the general blueprint of Ambo 61, discovering a series of victims, could vary. Easily set up a Chicago PD crossover, and all it takes to involve Novak in the action is for her and Violet to run into the culprits before CPD can clear the scene. This could put Lizzie's life in jeopardy with enough urgency. The series could also take a page from The Rookie, which has set up action beats for LAFD's Bailey in circumstances such as an out-of-control hostage situation, leading to one or more people requiring emergency medical care. Whatever premise Chicago Fire might use to thrust Novak into the middle of a CPD case, the best news is that all One Chicago leads returning for the 2025 to 2026 season allow for any current intelligence members to join forces with AMBO 61. With such a large array of story opportunities and team-ups available, Whodun's desired crossover is very much a near-future possibility. Enjoy Screen Rant's primetime coverage? Click below to sign up for our weekly Network TV newsletter. Make sure to check Network TV in your preferences and get the inside scoop from actors and showrunners on your favorite series. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe my Fast Gossip 24 to our channel and stay with us.